Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Good. Recovering from the weekend.
Indeed, yes.
Got a little warm this weekend.
A little hot.
But every place it's a little warm. Kill the viruses. There'll be no virus left after
They were
this.
dropping dead.
But you know, the propaganda, though, is still alive. I think that a lot of the virus is dead. And we find those statistics, but then there's others. You read the headline. You always have to see, if you see a headline say, there's a horrible, horrible thing happening and there's going to be a second wave and everybody's going to die, you have to really study and read about 2 lines down. Then you'll find out that there's a little bit of exaggeration. That's sort of what's been going on in Texas. They said Texas didn't have any activity early on, but now it's not a second wave, it's a big first wave, and there's a lot of scare tactics going on, you know, about Texas. But, you know, our governor is very aggressive. He's not bashful, and here we hear again a second wave in Lake Jackson. You know, no deaths in Lake Jackson.
No deaths, no.
But they're closing down our favorite shopping mall right nearby again. But there's stores open across the street from the mall, but they will be helped. But the people, if you happen to have a little shop in the mall,
Too bad.
You lose the money. And I'm just still wondering about my barber and this sort of thing. But I just, psychologically, they say all things were neutral. I still think there's something a little bit nutty about going to a barber shop with 1 or 2 people with a mask on. But a lot of people interpret the rules. Technically, you probably could argue with them, but it doesn't matter. It's all PR and how intimidated they are, how scared the people are, how likely it is to people to report you, and how they want you to be guilty from not, you know, playing your role and doing your part in making sure that this finally ends. So it's a propaganda coup. It's been working pretty well. But I think it's weakening now, and I just wish it had weakened a little sooner, because remember when Fauci started talking, I think we sort of hinted, hey, be careful, be careful. But now I understand that Trump hasn't talked to Fauci in probably a month or so.
Good for him.
But that's sort of a common practice that you know, people join the administration, they don't last long, and then they have to leave because they discover what they're doing. Yeah. And all they have to do is give us a call, and we'd look it up. We'd go to the internet and check these people out and find out what they can do. But there's a lot of headlines. They're saying one thing. There's a lot of facts, but I can't help but think that we've been on the right track all along to take a position where this is serious, it's dangerous, people do die from it. But in perspective, probably, you know, driving to the emergency room or sitting in a line waiting to get your test done with this heat, you know, they're out in a car. That's probably more dangerous than if they had the flu. So, and oftentimes, you know, when I was doing surgery, you always have to have disclaimers because things can go wrong, and you explain, you know, the possibilities of what would happen. But one thing that I used to try to reassure them, I says, but statistically, you're going to be in greatest danger when you're in your automobile, going to the hospital. And, you know, I used that as an example, but I think there was a lot of truth to that, because most people go in for elective surgery, don't die. But right now, we can't even figure out those statistics. They are back trying to regulate elective surgery again. I think our governor suggested, there's too many choices. People don't deserve to make these choices. You mean the patient and the doctor could do this and make the decision? And they have these experts at the CDC and all these other places. You need the government to make you safe and secure, which is believed by the majority of the people, which is something I don't believe. You know, I practice medicine, I've been in Congress, and there's no reason for you to think, you know, politicians should practice medicine, and there's no reason to believe what the politicians tell you, except for a few examples when I guess it's an accident or something. But most of the time, it's always spin, and they wouldn't consider it lie. It's white lies, spin, propaganda, because they have an agenda. But I've never seen it like it is today, because everything coming from the far left and the Marxist group, everything is driven by do whatever is possible, even lie, just to get rid of the president. and they've been doing that for 3 years, with Russiagate and everything. So this has been something they've used, and I assume it's going to continue for a while longer, because I think it's starting to break our way, and people are starting to realize, that they're not hearing the truth, and people are getting frustrated. And I think it'll be led by the young people. They're the ones who would like to go to the beach.
Yeah.
So let's hope that we're moving in that direction now.
Well, there's still a lot of fear out there, I can say. But before I start, I just want to remind our viewers that at the end of today's show, because it's Monday, we are going to scroll our thank you to our Super Chat donors who over the past week have donated during the show, and we appreciate. And a special shout out to Nick Gore, who's been a real good supporter since we started the Super Chat. So we're going to, those that have really stood out, we really want to try to thank you personally. So thanks a lot for participating and helping us keep the show going. But yeah, the Sunbelt hysteria is what we've been noticing. We watched the scare headlines over the weekend. Huge scare, Florida, Arizona, death and destruction, Armageddon is here, and it's really interesting. But when you drill down a little bit, and thankfully there are some very good people who are involved. Alex Berenson is one who's a former New York Times writer who does a lot on Twitter. When they drill down into what this is really all about, it's fascinating. We decided not to put up this chart because it's complicated. Maybe I'll link to it in the description. But the interesting thing about the so-called spike over the past week or so, Dr. Paul, is that 65% of the CDC reported COVID deaths for the week ending July 4th, I believe it was, 65% of those deaths actually occurred in April and May. But they were delayed. There was a couple of month delay in reporting. There's a backlog. So in fact, the actual deaths that occurred that week were very, very small and much less than the week prior. So you have a huge backlog. They load them onto that week's reporting. Then you get the headlines, massive spike in deaths. Everyone is having a panic attack over it. But when you really look back, you don't see what they're talking about.
But then you still we have to at least question, their definition of how they really died.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is think about the episode where it was 3,700 that were finally reported at a nursing home, and all of a sudden they had this boost, and they hadn't even tested them.
No testing.
And you don't have to. And the quality of the testing, there's so many questions. So even when you state this, assuming that they could be right, it might be even flimsier than they even try to describe it to be. So it's a real shame, because it's so much of it is based on lies. So
yeah, I don't know if you noticed this over the last couple of days, but I kept looking for the scare headlines on Texas, because we saw a lot of it last week. Texas, a disaster, hospitals overrun, unbelievable, people dropping in the streets. We didn't see any over the last couple of days, even though the Houston mayor is still pushing for a shutdown. Of course, he shut down the Republicans from having their meeting there, but he wants to shut the city down again. But I think the reason why all of a sudden we're not seeing the scare headlines, well, look, gosh, let's go to this first graph, if we can, this first JPEG, and we'll see what's happening. These are daily new cases in Texas. They've been declining precipitously since a post-July 4th increase. Of course, what this also means, cases means people who test positive. Not generally what you'd call a case, but it was a massive increase because we've increased sevenfold the number of people we're testing. But look at the next one, Dr. Paul. Here's another reason why we're not having a big Texas. Daily deaths in Texas have gone way back down about to where they were before this so-called spike. So the big hype about Texas is not happening right now.
Right, and there was a little bit of, I guess, misinformation or deliberately misinformation in Phoenix. The mayor of Phoenix, Kate Gallego. I heard about the story, but I didn't realize when she made the statement. She was on a friendly TV station interviewing her, and it was almost like a special announcement. What I have as an announcement today in this town. There's so many bodies around. We're waiting for the refrigerated hearses to come and pick up these bodies, and now it turns out it was never true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing to me. I guess it shouldn't amaze me anymore, but it's just annoying, at least, that they still continue to pump out these lies. I don't know how they live with themselves. I don't know what they call it. They can't be kidding. They can be stupid, or they can be deliberately trying to win an election and blame everything that goes wrong in this area, of course, is designed by this coalition of the Marxists and the media and everybody else to make sure that you can't have the independence of Trump or the unknowing Trump. You know what might happen and where he's going to come down on. But this is amazing that she made this announcement. Not true at all.
Yeah. I mean, if the people wanted to have something against Trump to run against him, they should talk to us too, because we got our list of grievances with Trump is longer than you would imagine. But yeah, she was caught out, and it was just like Houston, because she went out there. She's a Democrat. I know you're shocked. She's a Democrat, and she went out there with these scare stories about we need refrigerated trucks. The bodies are dropping, and the head of the hospital said, "This isn't true. It's just not true. We're not really seeing an increase at all." And in fact, let's look at this. This is interesting about Arizona, Dr. Paul. I meant to put this up last week, and I found it fascinating. If we can do this next clip really quick. This is right on the 25th of May. Arizona stopped their reopening, and that you can see the increase in you did not see a decrease in cases in Arizona. So it didn't really have an effect at all, really. And let's look at the next one. This is, here she is. She talks about bringing refrigerator trucks for the bodies. Turned out to be a lie. I think she was on MSNBC or something. But this is interesting. So I thought about this because, you know, the governor of Arizona is a Republican. And I hate making this about party politics, but it can't be ignored. So I went and I looked back at the 2016 election, Dr. Paul. Trump won Arizona with 48.08% of the vote. Hillary was close behind at 44.58% of the vote. Makes you wonder.
Yeah, big surprise, right? So, well, unfortunately, that's the way it's been going. But you know, we also have other states that have been bothered. I mean, it's the same type of deceit and lying, isn't it? In Florida, that's happening too. The headlines there can't reveal it, because I think we had a governor there that really didn't, you know, he wanted to be restrained, but, you know, and I think Trump did too, but public pressure is tremendous, tremendous influence on everything that we do. But I just think what they don't report on, which we can when we find it, is when the people stood alone and things didn't do it. I think Sweden right now was one country that had good statistics. They held back, and yet when the dust settles, they had no more people die, and maybe less, I don't know.
Less than some European countries.
Right.
Well, Florida is big, Dr. Paul, and there's a couple of reasons. Let's actually go to this next one. This is the Judge Report, which I hesitate to even put up because it's really almost unreadable these days. But here's their big headline this morning. Florida, largest day increase of any state since pandemic. Interesting how they don't say increase in what? You know, in deaths? No, it's actually not that. It's in cases. But they make it sound ambiguous. But I found it curious, that headline underneath that. Republican convention at risk. And it makes you wonder why they're singling out Florida at all. And I talked about Alex Berenson when we started. Let's take a look at this next clip, Dr. Paul, because this is interesting. After a week of nightmare headlines about Florida and about 70,000 new cases, aka positive tests, hospitals have had a grand total of 130 more patients, i.e. 2.5%, in ICU beds statewide than last Sunday. Can't make it up. 45 deaths today in a state with 20 million people. That puts it in perspective.
Yeah, and they're going to be successful. You know, the Republicans had to cancel in Texas, not because everybody's going to die if they had a convention. It was mainly if one person died because they had a heart attack because it's hot or something, it would be blamed. You would have the guilt, and the president would have to answer to it. So it's this pure deceit and demagoguery that politicians have always done it, but I think it's uglier and nastier than ever before. And there are some people who just think that, you know, definitely if we ever had 4 more years of Trump, it's not that we're going to have a libertarian society at the end of that 4 years, but the people who want to run the show, and believe me, the more I read and study, the more I think that this is just not scare tactics when we talk about Marxism. I mean, and Black Lives Matter. And people who have done some research can show where these people are trained individuals. That isn't how they get their crowds and the mobs out there. But the leaders have to, and there's an incentive because they read the headlines. We read it and we say, it's not true, let's find out what's happening. They read or hear about it and it doesn't matter, let's go out and have some fun, let's go out and, we have our hate too. We want to express ourselves. They've been nasty to us, we got to go out and hate somebody.
That's true, but you talk about Sweden. There's another place where we should have a good news story, and you talked about it earlier. This is New York City. And let's even look at this Bloomberg. And you sent this over this morning, and I thought, oh, so finally some good news. New York City reaches milestone with no reported virus deaths, the first time since March. In April 7th, their high was 597 deaths in that one day. Now they've reached 0 deaths, which is great. You think they'd be out celebrating, enjoying it. Maybe they have herd immunity in New York, but guess what, Dr. Paul? Indoor dining is still banned in New York City. You cannot dine indoor. You cannot have any public events. This is according to Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York. All public events, parades, everything is canceled for the summer. He said, this is a moment of historic moment of change. We have to respect that, but also say to people, these kinds of gatherings that we're used to, parades, fairs, we just can't have them while we're focusing on health right now. And then Wolf Blitzer said, well, what about Black Lives Matter protests? And he said, well, this is a historic moment. We have to respect that. So the only public events allowed this summer in New York City are going to be Black Lives Matter protests.
In that article that talked about this, I got a good kick out of the one individual that made this point. He said that if now we have to have an idea to go out shopping, and we will have to have our passport and all this. So you have to get permission if you want to go out of your house, unless you want to vote. no idea if you're going to vote. You can you vote as many times as you want, and send a card in the mail. And I think there's been a few indications that massive absentee voting is risky if you're looking for an accurate count. But that's the emphasis they have. They misplace it, and then they don't know really what they're trying to do. Except, I hate Trump. Can't let him get reelected, and all the Republicans are ganging up on him. You see the story. It's not the Democrats that don't like him. It's the Republicans that don't like him, and they're out to get him. There's always some Democrats, some Republicans or some Democrats who will oppose their nominee. Yeah. So this is the case, but of course the way it's reported is a big deal. But coronavirus is a big deal in this election. The lockdown is a big deal in this election. And we have a lot of criticism about the lockdown. Yeah. And even though Trump might not have been super excited about it, he still has some responsibility for it. And it's too bad that we couldn't have talked him into not listening to Fauci in the beginning.
Yeah. But you might be coming around. Let's look at the next clip, Dr. Paul. Let's try to cheer ourselves up a little bit because, okay, this is the same thing. Trump retweets a tweet saying the CDC lies about COVID. And you have a piece from Politico that you were looking at about the same thing. So he might be coming around a little bit on attacking the CDC and Fauci himself.
I think he'd distance himself. It's not easy. It's easy to get something passed if you can gather up enough support. It's not on principle, but this group, yeah, important, and get something passed. To reverse it is really, really tough. So under the circumstances, people have to realize that even even if he wanted us to do some of this, they just do it, just do it. It is, there's a lot of activity going on there, and especially when the judicial system, the FBI and the CIA ganged up on them, and then they had control of things. That has to have been pretty close to being called a coup, or at least they were close to it. But they still have that type of thing, going on. I imagine there's plenty of people in law enforcement and Justice Department and the FBI that are honest people. But that doesn't matter. All you have to have is a few people in charge and leaders, and they still send out the orders. I think back when studying about the Kennedy assassination, and when the person that was the CIA director, Richard, or I'm sorry.
Was it Helms?
Let's see. Okay. Anyway, the person that orchestrated had been the chair, the head of the CIA, and then they kicked him out. That's Kennedy fired him. So when they fired him, he orchestrated this whole thing to get Kennedy for being fired. But the total irony of all that is he was put on the investigation.
Oh, Dulles,
on Dulles, that he was put on the investigation for the thing he probably, I believe it, I really do believe that. And now that was way back, and that's a significant event. This time they did a little bit differently. They just, we're so powerful, and their plan was, we own this government. Hillary's going to win, so therefore we'll just, do it legally. Yeah. And it looks like it didn't work, which is fortunate.
And then Trump's his worst enemy because he hires a bunch of people who oppose his policies and do everything they can to mess him up. So there you have it. But you talked about this earlier, so let's just throw this one clip because this kind of goes with what we were doing last week when they said death rate is down, but that's no reason to celebrate. Here's a little thing on Sweden. Sweden, this is from Business Insider a couple days ago. Sweden's coronavirus death toll is now approaching 0. But experts are warning others not to hail it as a success. Just because you defeated the virus, you can't celebrate success.
You get negative interest rates. I wonder if it'll have negative death rates and not reported.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be negative in the sense that there'll be more people dying from the flu or something, automobiles, but they'll never put it into perspective. There's only one perspective, and that is the terrorism portrayed by coronavirus, and everybody's going to die from it, which just isn't true.
It's not true. Well, I guess we're getting close to closing, so I would just say one other thing. You might want to talk about it at all, but Jeff Deist, who does the Mises Institute and is a good friend of ours, he had a good post today, good little comment that I thought was worth repeating, or at least the essence of what he said was important. He talking about the face mask mandate. And you see it everywhere. I mean, Dr. Wall, it is so crazy. We went to breakfast after church yesterday, and you walk in front of the restaurant, there's a sign. You must wear your face mask from the threshold of the door to your table. Then you can take it off. And of course we didn't, and we didn't have any problems. But the absurdity of having, so you walk from here to your table and you could get corona, but once you sit down, it's going to leave you alone while you eat. It's
they have those viruses trained.
Trained very well, yeah. But Jeff points out that if they really were life-saving devices, the masks that we're told, there would be they would be standardized like medical equipment is. You have a standard pacemaker, generally speaking. If they really were effective medical tools, and they would be completely mandated because they're effective tools, and here's the U.S. standardized face mask, but then at the same time, you would have an opening of concerts, of bars, of restaurants and everything, because we know, here's our, face mask that's approved and that's all completely compartmentalized. But what we have is a mishmash of weird things. People are putting on socks on their heads and carburetors on their mouths and crazy things. And you have partial shutdown. So it's sort of the worst of all worlds. It absolutely makes no sense at all.
Well, I told you a little story, but I might suggest to people who, if they feel compelled to follow the rule, they don't have the detail of the exact mask you have. So somebody said, and used it in a little play, they put on a long ranger.
There you go.
They have a mask on. So And of course, the irony of all this is they're really working hard on being able to identify us all just by our facial recognition.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll get along with that. But what do you do if everybody has a mask on? You know, that sort of complicates things. But we don't want either. We don't want the mask, and we don't want facial identification either.
Yeah. I'll just show the last clip really quick then, just to close out
Yeah.
completely. This is from the CDC, by the way, the great experts on coronavirus, and this is the actual flyer, information flyer on what to do for COVID-19. And you can look at it and zoom in, but what it says, what not to do. Don't go to China, okay, fair enough. Do not use face masks. CDC does not recommend the use of face masks for the general U.S. public to prevent the spread of 2019 COVID virus. So the question is, are they wrong then? Are they wrong now? When should we trust them? When should we not trust them?
And the answer is they shouldn't be in the business of pretending they know and being able to use it for political reasons so they can flip-flop. Just think how many times, we'll have to, yeah, we said that, but we'll withdraw this, we'll re-say that. You know, it's all back and forth. That's why you want government out of our business. And the people will imperfectly take care of themselves a lot better than the criminals. And, they're too strong. The people that go to Washington, you know, and they certainly commit criminalities because of what they do. They overstep the bounds. They take an oath of office. But I checked out, and there's a lot of votes that are unconstitutional in Washington. So, well, okay. Did you have?
No, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. This has been a lively discussion as usual, but we also have to realize that this is a battle. To me, it's a battle for liberty versus authoritarianism. It's been going on for a long time. America had a bit of a success in its early years, but in the last 100 years or so, the emphasis has been away from liberty and been drawn to authoritarianism and the loss of liberty, and we're at a climactic end of a period of time, which means that maybe it can be shifted and going in the direction of more liberty. But quite frankly, at the rate we're going, we're still in bad shape. We might have to see the elimination or the weakening of the system we have now. For those people who are in the remnant trying to maintain the principles of liberty can rebuild. And that certainly is going to be necessary economically speaking. It's certainly going to have to be necessary on the principles of authoritarianism in government and the principles of protecting our liberties rather than running our lives. And this, of course, would involve very much our very firm policy on what foreign policy ought to be, and that is don't take care of people here at home and manage their lives and tell them everything that they can do. Of course, we shouldn't be involved doing that around the world. Guess what? We would be working then in the direction of a more peaceful, more prosperous America, and right now it needs all of the help it can get. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today and supporting our efforts to promote promote those rules of peace and prosperity. They're worthy goals. And thank you.